Hello everyone, welcome to MPLS and segment routing basic to advanced learning journey. This is our fifth session, and today finally we will talk about segment routing. So far we have covered MPLS and different aspect of it. Now in today's session I will be talking about why segment routing. So basically, one real story from my lifetime, which actually emphasized the need for why segment routing. When I looked at segment routing, that was the story that came to my mind. So I will share that with you guys, and probably you will also be able to connect the dot why segment routing. And then another story from my life which actually happened with me well before the segment routing inception. So that also I will cover in today's session, and that should give you a hint on what exactly segment routing is. So first story on the why part, the second story is on the what part, and then basically you will be able to connect the dots. So this session is for the beginners, and it's my belief that even the experienced users will find it useful. So feel free to watch this at 2x speed. So with that, let's just get into the why part of the segment routing and my first encounter with a problem where I felt that segment routing, if it would have been at that time, we would have not even faced that issue. So, what was exactly that? So, I was working for a service provider in 2011 time frame, and this service provider was actually growing at an exponential rate from somewhere around 300 to 400 nodes network. We had grown at that time close to 3800 nodes. This is just to give you a perspective at what speed this service provider was growing, for which I was working. I worked for this service provider for 2.5 years or close to 3 years or so. So when this rapid scale was happening in terms of network expansion, we were also growing in the number of services, or basically the type of services that we were providing. And it was all the way from L3 VPN to different type of L2 VPN that we were providing. So the point here is, when this network was growing, anything which was manual work was creating a overhead for us because we have to do it at a scale. And I still remember our SVP, whom I still admire even today for his visions, called us and told us that how can we get rid of this manual work and use some sort of automation. Though he hadn't used this word automation at that time, it was somewhere around 2011, but this is what he wanted to get rid of. So me and couple of my colleagues, we were part of an escalation team, took this challenge, and then we hired two programmers who were basically there to help us out with the scripting work. So what we did is we sat with them. We were from the networking background, so we knew this network in and out. They were from the programming side, so we helped them, or basically helped each other to come up with something. And then the result of this exercise, which I still remember, lasted for somewhere around 3 months. We came up with a script, and it was actually more than a script, where we did not expected the user who want to use this script to be a programming guy. So this we were clear from the start. And how we did this is that front end of this script, if you understand programming a bit, was a dashboard. At that dashboard was taking some input in the form of a GUI from the engineer, and then it create a configuration of the complete device in the backend, and then it was pushing it on the final device. We tested it in the lab, even though this was kind of a startup environment, so we didn't had that luxury to test it on different type of devices, but we did sufficient testing. And then on the D-Day, we handed over this complete package to our backbone team. This team was actually responsible for provisioning any new routers in a service provider network. So we given them, and normally this team used to provision these devices in the night, because in the day they were busy with other troubleshooting or day-to-day tasks. So the night engineer came, he opened this dashboard and put all the details like the loopback address, IP address, the interface IP addresses, blah blah blah, and the config got generated and pushed on a new PE device. And then he actually provisioned 3 PE on that day. And then we had this process where if backbone team actually provision any PE, the new provider edge device, they will actually send an email to other team. One of them was provisioning team, which actually provision customer network. So they send an email to these guys that we have new PE live in this area. If any customer come, feel free to provision. So when this provisioning team got this email, and it was a coincidence that next morning there were few customers waiting to be live, so they configured those customer also on these 3 Ps. And then when the customer came online at around 9 a.m., they start their operations. They said that our newly provisioned site in these regions are down. And this, by the way, was a premium customer. So they had this escalated support. And the issue directly came to our team. We were part of L3 escalation, and we troubleshooted this issue. Obviously, it took us some time to figure out that there was some sort of misconfiguration that I will tell you. But I still remember that this took us somewhere around 11 minutes, and that downtime came on us in terms of the service level agreement, that customer network was down even though newly provisioned, but on a SP. Now we convinced them these were the new link, testing was not done, blah blah blah. I'm not going in that direction. But the issue here, or now let's come to the issue. The issue that we saw is that on some of the link, like each of our PE, we had this standard that it will have at least two minimal uplinks, the core backbone link. So one link we saw that LDP was enabled, other link we saw only OSPF was enabled. LDP configuration on this one and OSPF configuration on this interface was missing. When we dig deeper into that, there was some sort of delay that was happening over a WAN when this script was pushing the configuration. And this is what we had not tested because in the lab there was no WAN piece which was involved. So I called this guy and told that your script failed and it did not configure all the necessary parameters. And then this programmer told me one thing which I still remember. He told that Sunil, your network has so many interlinked pieces that my program is going crazy. What he was referring is that you have LDP, you have OSPF, you have BGP, you have RSVP because we were using traffic engineering. You have a lot of these interconnected dots that is making my program crazy. And one of them is missed. Basically, that end-to-end traffic will not work. So Sunil, can't there be a scope of minimizing this overhead? Can't there be a scope of minimizing these overhead or using less of these pieces and achieving the same? That time to this programmer I did not had an answer. But fast forward, when I was introduced to segment routing, I exactly echoed the same story. Let me show you why. So if we clear this ink, and this is actually what we had at that time. Of course, there was IP, then this was OSPF. We were using LDP, RSVP for traffic engineering purpose, of course, BGP LU to stitch the domain, and then L3 and L2 VPN. So many of these pieces. But if we use segment routing, then basically I can achieve the same thing but with lesser number of protocols, lesser number of interconnected pieces. I don't need RSVP, I don't need MPLS LDP. That way, when that programmer writes the program, it will be less overhead. So this was my first encounter with segment routing, and I immediately was like, yes, this is what we needed at that time and even now. So if I want to summarize this point, instead of using so many of these control plane protocols, if we can have simply segment routing in the data plane and EVPN in the control plane, that basically make my end-to-end automation easier, and it can span across multiple domains. I will talk about what I mean by multiple domains in the upcoming lectures, but the key point from the first story is that if I have less pieces, then my programming or the automation will also be easier. And here I want to tell you one thing, that MPLS as a data plane was never challenged. It was only the scope of improvement in the control plane where we have LDP, RSVP, and then even BGP. So there was some scope of optimization here, and that is what exactly the segment routing piece did. So now that you know by this story at least one reason, I will cover more in our upcoming session. One reason why we need segment routing, let me tell you what segment routing is. So now let's just jump into the what part of it. And here also, again, one story from my lifetime which actually echoed in my mind when I read about segment routing. So when I was in college, what used to happen is that during any marriage, there were certain responsibilities that were assigned to me and my brother. So I belong to an Indian family, and there, after any marriage, there is a tradition in our family that we used to distribute sweets. So these sweets, either on the same day or the very next day, need to be distributed to the known ones who came on this marriage function. And I still remember I was in the second year of my college, and my father used to give me a list of people, let's call them A, B, C, and D for simplicity, and some boxes of sweets which need to be distributed. So I take a bike along with those boxes and this list in my hand and used to deliver the boxes at their homes. So I was following this without even knowing what exactly is the significance behind this list. So one time I still remember that I got this list in this order and the boxes of sweets, and I started delivering them. So I delivered to A's house and I was heading towards B. And there was some road construction work was happening, so I skipped B and given the sweet to C. And by the time it was already getting dark, so I thought that let me quickly go to B's house and give the sweet before I get back to my home, and D we will plan some other day. But then it was my unlucky day that the bike ran out of fuel. So I came home, and by that time it was already dark. And then after half an hour or so, I got a call from my father saying, why you have not delivered the sweet to B? I was like, yes, I need to deliver, but I will give that tomorrow. But then my father told, it doesn't work that way. You have delivered the sweet to C, but not to B. It's a disrespect because B was elder brother of C, and in Indian traditions we give the sweets to elder first and then the younger ones. And here unknowingly I given to the younger brother but not to the elder brother. And that time my father told me, I still remember those words, that when I had given you the list, you need to follow that exactly. That list had certain hierarchy, certain order which need to be followed. And Then I realized that okay, I made a mistake. So I said that I will go and deliver it now. But then my father took me and he delivered the sweet on that same day itself. And I had to apologize. That's a different story actually. So here, one thing is that I was having this list of houses where I need to deliver the packet, the sweets packet, and that too in the order. So, fast forward to this beautiful corporate world when I was first introduced about segment routing. This story echoed back in my mind when I was reading about the introduction of segment routing. So, if I clear this ink, so segment routing from an introduction perspective, here a source chooses a path and encode it on top of the packet itself in certain ordered fashion. Like I was there on the bike with the list which was given by my father in a ordered fashion, and I simply need to execute that when I am there on the bike. That means I am delivering the packet. Same way here, rest of the network node just follow these encoded instructions which source put on the packet. What exactly this means, I will cover in our next session. But for now, with this story, you understand this part that it is the packet itself which has all this information that I need to go to A first. From there, I need to go to B and then to C. I need to follow this path in this order itself before I reach to my final destination. And then one more thing, what exactly is the segment? So segment is nothing but just an identifier or a specific forwarding instruction, or you think of it as a router. Let's say I have these routers 1 2 3, let's say this is 4. I tell that you take the path from 1 to 2 to 3. So each of these can be a segment. But again, I will cover these topics in much more detail in our upcoming session. The purpose of this session was to cover what exactly the purpose of this session was first to cover why segment routing. So I hope with my story you are able to connect the dot somehow, and then what exactly the segment routing is. So if you want to know more, stay tuned to this series. I will definitely upload some more lectures. With that, thank you very much for listening. I hope this was informative.